time illustrated, I think, very well that issue of accumulation of risk, but also accumulation, which is man-made accumulation of risk by the way the buildings are built, by the way our cities are planned, by the way our environment is managed. And I hope very much that we can touch on some ways today in which some good examples of how individual countries are managing that risk. This side event on risk identification and national capacity to manage risks was organized jointly by the Global Risk Identification Program, which is a joint UN agency undertaking, hosted by UNDP, by the World Health Organization, by the UN High Commission for Refugees, by UN Habitat and the International Federation of Red Cross and Red Crescent Societies. In an initiative promoted by GRIP, these agencies have formed a partnership with the purpose of delivering as one in risk assessment. You may know that there's a delivering as one in terms of many things in terms of the UN's work, particularly in risk assessment. Now, central to the work of this partnership, and I think it's central to the work of the United Nations teams at country levels, is the close work that we do with a number of governments, supporting those governments in their own efforts to identify risks. And I'm very pleased to have with me today the Minister of Emergency Situations of Armenia, Mr. Arman Garetsayan. I have Armenian friends, but I still don't pronounce all the names right, so apologies. Ms. Maria de Pilar Conedo, the Minister of Disaster Risk Management of Ecuador. We'll have joining with us shortly Mrs. Laura Gorza Jaida, General Coordinator, National Civil Protection of Mexico. And we have sitting at our left Ms. Natalie Zawor, Disaster Risk Management Unit, Presidency of the Council of Ministers of Lebanon. Now, risk identification is not always something that's so scientific. I was actually listening to a story of someone at one of these meetings yesterday, and they talked about, I think it was Indonesia, and how there used to be someone who lived on the side of the volcano, and that particular volcano, this man traditionally knew when risks would come. He was sort of connected with the volcano, a very folk tradition that sometimes had worked. But in this case, it wasn't scientific and it didn't work. And unfortunately, this man died when the volcano erupted. So risk identification has not always been scientific in the past, but now it is scientific. The science has advanced, much can be done, and if it's done right, good risk identification can save, well, hundreds of thousands, perhaps millions of lives in certain circumstances. But while it is scientific, risk identification is not yet widely applied, or as widely applied as it should be. So one of the purposes of this small session is to show how this can be done. Now, based on the experiences presented by the panelists, this event will produce recommendations on how countries can be best supported with their risk identification efforts. Understanding that comprehensive risk information underpins the risk reduction efforts of national governments, sectoral agencies, municipal authorities, civil societies, and the private sector. Understanding all that, the panelists will be joined by representatives of the organizing agencies to discuss efforts done by countries to understand disaster risks and to develop the solutions to manage the risks they are facing. The recommendations produced by the discussions will be included in a special report. I'd like to welcome Ms. Jaida from Mexico. So, we have two parts to this event. In the first part, country representatives will share experiences, the challenges they faced, and consider new approaches to developing their own capacities to identify and manage risks. Presentations will showcase risk assessment programs implemented by national governments and institutions with the assistance of UN agencies. In the second part, a panel of country representatives and members of relevant UN agencies will discuss ways to improve the understanding and management of disaster risks by focusing on three aspects. First, common challenges the countries are facing. Second, the sustainability of risk identification programs. given the fact that societies are dynamic systems in continuous change. And third, improved agency support, especially with better coordination and integrated approaches. Given the limited time available, we're asking the panelists to strictly keep presentations within the allocated 10 minutes. And we're identifying risks if you don't keep within those 10 minutes. Please be advised that signs will be shown to alert you of that risk. And at 10 minutes, we'll mark the end of the presentation. So please follow these instructions. And I think with that, I should pass over to Mr. Carlos. Should I pass over to Mr. Rockenschaub for moderating the discussion?
I'm the coordinator of the GRIP, UNDP. I think there is a lot of room for improvement in what the agencies do to support the countries, but I will try to focus on just three things. First, I think we should move from projects to programs. Traditionally, agencies have been supporting or implementing projects in countries. 6 months, 1 year, 2 years. But with 1 year of work, you don't solve anything in a country. It has to be a continuous, long-term program that guarantees continuity and sustainability. And unfortunately, we are still working very much at the project level. So we should move first from projects to programs. Second thing, capacity development should be the first priority of all of our efforts. Finally, solving the problem of the risk is the responsibility of the countries, not the responsibility of international organizations. We shouldn't be the ones doing the work. We should be the ones supporting the work of the local people and building the local capacities. One of the problems that I have had always is international organizations building the capacity of consultants and probably ensuring the livelihood of consultants and not really constructing the capacity of the countries. So we should move towards building the local capacities, installing the not only technical but institutional capacities, so the process can be continued in a sustainable basis. And the third one, and this is the purpose of this partnership that we have among the agencies organizing this meeting, we need to work as one. The purpose of this partnership is threefold. First, to improve coordination. Just by knowing what each other are doing in order to avoid duplication should be a great achievement. Second, ensure quality. Everybody is doing things differently. Nobody follows guidelines, standards established. We have to establish minimum standards to guarantee quality. And third, we are trying to provide integrated support. Each agency has developed methodologies, training packages, many things. We can integrate everything together and provide integrated support to the countries. So those are things in which we can work and improve our service.
General Nadim, and then the minister from Ecuador, and the brief intervention of the UNHCR according to that topic.
Thank you. I think I'll be quick. When we are talking of risk assessments within the governments, I think there are different stakeholders, some like the units which are responsible for mapping. There are other development partners which have the data of the infrastructure. There are other departments which may have data of the incidents or the events that have happened in the past, which kind of keep of record. So there is a lot of data available with different government agencies, but unfortunately we have not been able to bring that data on one table, which can be then intelligently shared with all the stakeholders. So I think the first and foremost challenge is to see what the existing data is available within the government and to be able to use it intelligently towards the optimum utilization. Second, I think also in many parts of the world, we don't see a central authority or an institution which can do this integration and take this agenda forward. We are lucky here that we have some examples which are leading this process, but in many countries, there is lack of an institutional system which will really take this system forward. Also, in many cases we have found out that there are lack of technical capacities to undertake a detailed risk assessment because it not only means having a layer of base maps, but also a layer of the different disasters with their profiles which can happen to a country, along with the response things. We need to know where different logistic bases or airports or ports are available from where you can mount or kind of a response towards the relief effort. Also, at least we in Pakistan have found that there is a negative sentiment in the market forces. For example, if you're doing a risk assessment of a city and tomorrow you say half of the city is not safe, the development agencies or the people who control the prices of the properties have a very negative view of it. All of a sudden you will see half of your property prices going really down. So there is a resistance to it, and these people are very influential lobbies in the government to ensure that it is not done. Also, we need to see that whereas we can do it at a macro level, there is also an issue of looking at identifying the local risks, which includes the industrial risk to a particular population. Then also, I think I wish to highlight the linkages of the transnational risk. There will be a lot of risks which can affect more than one country, and in many cases there will be a resistance to sharing of this knowledge. And I think we need to move on this, and there the role of the international humanitarian community and donor community will play a very, very critical role. In many cases, I think we are also losing sight of the urban risk assessment, including the microzonation, because again there are interest groups or vested interest groups which are not aligned to it to happen. So I think these are some of the institutional challenges which actually come your way before you can come up with a very robust risk assessment or risk analysis of a particular country. Thank you.
One key issue that I would like to mention here is, and in a bit General Nadim touched the issue, is the implementation. I mean, we are talking about information, but information is just a means for something else. We don't collect information for just having the information there. If you don't use it, it doesn't have any value. And it comes to my second point, which is we are talking a lot in these meetings during the last 2 days, and I'm sure for the next 3 days, about lessons learned. But how many lessons have we learned? And yesterday somebody was saying to me we should talk about lessons identified, which takes me to the other point. I mean, let's not just stay on the risk identification, but let's do something about it. Let's try to implement it. Let's try to use the identification and the mapping of risks to reduce vulnerability and do something about it. And finally, I fully agree that we have, especially from the UN side, we need a lot of coherence. And we need to start sharing information, and we need to start working together and have better partnerships and collaboration. And I think that will be the best way to support the governments and the countries. Thank you.
At the constitution level, so it's very important because these guarantees, of course, at least the constitution changes, but it takes a lot of projects to do that. These guarantees that it's taken in account as a state policy, and it's going to remain that. Also, we have it in the law. So to change the law, it also requires a lot of things. So it's very important for sustainability to have it at the highest level possible in each country. Also, it's important what Mr. Nadim mentioned about prevention, that also we in the planning and developing stages of each country, we keep risk reduction as part of the planning agenda. This will work in favor of sustainability of risk assessment, risk management, and risk reduction. And at the same time, there was a drought in the US, now there is flooding in the US, and we have droughts in some parts of South America. And this is very important, and very important for two different parts. One is that we should continue to support programs with the United Nations like the WMO with the developing capabilities within the countries for improving the short-term and seasonal forecast, which is very important for us, decision makers, in the sense of the applications taking into account climate change. And the second one is there is a need of regional integration. And this comes to say that the risk cross borders. And some very good example from South America is 2 months ago, the energy ministers of Colombia, Ecuador, Peru, and Chile made an agreement because Chile have droughts and they don't have enough water for hydropower. Colombia have floods and they have a lot of water for hydropower. So one common agreement was that we should have interconnected all the transmission lines. So if we manage the risk that comes from climate change with the streams in a short area, I will say from Northern South America to Southern South America, we can improve better prevention, which is very important and is something that very few people is working because of the overwhelming need to respond to these different things. So I think this is a very important challenge, to work together across borders. And the other one is the integration of the agendas of different United Nations agencies. So we can be more effective in how we fund different kind of projects and how we work within the countries and within the regions. And a third challenge, I think, is a legal frame. Very few countries have a legal frame for risk reduction. In the case of Ecuador, we're working on the legal frame. I know that there are some other countries that are good examples, and we're going to be looking at them. But I think legal frame for risk reduction is important thing to have, and that will be all my comments.
Thank you very much. Mandate has more responsibility and experience in political and socially induced conflicts or crisis. But as you know, very often it's the same population that is affected by natural disaster. So we might be talking of subset of the population we have to work with. And in that sense, we have 2 points, probably 2 set of challenges. First is that challenges vary in time. Most of them are related to information, access to information and data. It would be very different, those needs, and if you're talking about contingency plan, preparation plans, and we need a lot of information that to be more reactive. But we need different information and maybe a different level of accuracy when it's time to deploy stuff. We currently act into crisis in Ivory Coast and the countries neighboring Ivory Coast, countries around Libya also, where we have to deploy stuff, where we have to ship what we call non-food items to these locations, and we need very specific information for that. That is not always easy to access in a timely fashion. We need information about the crossing points, when the border crossings and populations are crossing those borders. What are the conditions of the borders? How can we deploy staff? How we can host or receive a population with specific needs? What are the needs of those populations? They have very specific vulnerabilities that the other population, the rest of the population, do not have. We have to be able to know those beforehand. And the type of data also that we need can be very specific. We need first, of course, to know what is the profile of those populations, the numbers, their exact location, what is their ethnic or language background, because the way to interact with displaced population can be very different depending on their origin. Again, what are their specific vulnerabilities? So it's important, I think, to consider these specificities of displaced population, be it for natural disasters or the type of crisis. We have to also consider that the UN is often working in inter-agency coordination in those contexts, clusters or others. How do we share the information? Who's doing what and where? How do we avoid duplication? There's a lot of coordination that is involved there. What is not to be forgotten also is that we do appeals for funds. How do we coordinate those appeals to make sure that the money is well targeted and well spent? Those are the type of challenges I think that we have to consider. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Mr. Moderator. I must say, we in the Red Cross Red Crescent, our approach for working at communities is based on vulnerability, capacity, and risk identifications. Our contract with communities is not based on disasters. It's based on vulnerability. Our job to reduce vulnerability and risk, and the way we handle information, we go into the communities to look into vulnerabilities, capacities, what can they do about that, and then what is the overall risk in that communities. To this effect, our information system actually has 3 pillars. What we call it VCA, vulnerability capacity assessment. That is to understand better what existing in that community is living at risk. Number 2, public awareness and education. We do it in schools and outside schools to disseminate the information we gather about risk and vulnerabilities. And there are many risks that could be done and dealt with only through public awareness and education. And then finally, what we call it community-based early warning systems, community-based monitoring systems. making sure that any information coming from the science, from national air warning systems, from the meteorological department has been simplified, disseminated, and spread. And that there is an action taken on that information. So all the job what we try to do in the international federation to support the members, member national societies. I'm glad that many of the panel members, they mentioned they have their national societies in Lebanon Red Cross, in Armenia Red Cross. They have been part of their national risk identification systems. And what we try to do as federation to make sure that that is sustainable. Sustainable through building the local technical expertise, sustainable through getting predictable longer-term resources to make sure that this investment at the community is not one-off and that we do it and move away, and sustainable through creating the linkages with the science. I mean, there is a lot of investment, billions and billions being invested on global monitoring systems, global air warning systems, but in most cases get captured at that global level, never goes down to the communities. So our job in the federation to make sure that the right thing is being done, information being simplified, disseminated, and reaching the public on time, and there is enough resources and capacities for them to take actions on that. Thank you very much.
The disaster risk analysis so that you can continuously update it with the national ownership, because this national ownership is critical for getting the legal coverage, as was highlighted very correctly, and to make sure that it remains on the table of all the development planners so that they can plan things which are disaster resilient, or at least they don't plan things which are disaster prone areas. Second, I think, is to create a national/international network of the concerned agencies who will continuously update it, share the best practices that have learned or evolved over a period of time, so that your product gets refined all the time. And I think it remains relevant to the emerging situation that we have now. With climate change coming in and really, sort of worsening the situation, you have to bring in that element also into the risk assessment. So I think these were two of the major points that I wanted to just throw in for the
Thank you.
Session in a way that it would present national experiences, and I think we were successful in doing that because excellent national experiences were presented, and I think even inspiring national experiences. I hope experiences that will inspire other countries. I think also there was some good work done in identifying some of the barriers that there are to risk identification being done better, barriers to risk identification actually being applied to make a difference in preventing disasters. I think another important point was that the United Nations, and not just the UN, but international partners, development banks, have to make it easier on the individual countries by our working together better, providing seamless support and providing the sort of financing that actually builds up national capacities rather than perhaps in some cases depleting national capacities. So with that, I want to give a big thank you to the interagency team that helped put this together. A big thank you to my colleagues from the government for the privilege to be here at the table, General Nadeem from Pakistan for his contribution, and also to the project staff of GRIP, led by Carlos, who put a lot of work into this and did an excellent job. Thank you very much.